what, 90% of people who start podcasts don't make it past 10 or 14 episodes. And such a big reason why is because of all of this other stuff that they didn't realize they had to do, like, I have to write show notes and a description. I have to promote this thing. What? And so can you imagine just how much more like freer people will be in I just have to create really good content, as in that podcast episode, and hey, Capsho can do everything else for you.
Welcome to the Women in Podcasting Show. Enjoy inspiring stories, interesting interviews, and powerful strategies from women around the world. Jennifer Hensel spotlights today's top podcasters, new podcasters, and expert guests. Get tips for leveling up your life, gaining visibility, growing your business, monetizing your podcast, and so much more. We invite you to support women in finding their voice and sharing their passion. It's all about women empowering women.
Welcome, everyone, to the Women in Podcasting Show. This is Jennifer Hensel. I have an amazing guest with me today, Deirdre Tshien. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me, Jen.
Thank you so much for being here. And Deirdre and I are recent collaborators. We're collaborating for the first time on an amazing summit that she's going to have, and we'll talk about that later. And it's just been a pleasure connecting with Deirdre. So I really hope you listen. There's a lot of tools we're going to talk about for podcasters. This is a really important episode if you want to increase your visibility and get your podcast out there further. So Deirdre's got some amazing stuff to share with us. Deirdre, let's start with your entrepreneurial and podcast journey.
Yes. Okay. So I started my entrepreneurship journey almost a decade ago. And you can probably tell from my accent that I am not from States. I am actually from Sydney in Australia. And we started a brick and mortar. It was a hospitality business, which is crazy when you think about the fact that we had absolutely no background in that industry at all. But it was a dessert bar because we love our desserts. My husband, Ash, loved baking. And so we thought, why not? We started it, had no idea what we were doing. And it was tough. I think starting any new business is tough, but a brick and mortar one, when you're like on the hook for rent and debt from fit out and all these things, it was really, really challenging. Anyway, fast forward, and we were able to actually grow that brand to 5 locations in Sydney. We started and grew a burger restaurant alongside that called Stacks on Burgers. So we have two of those locations. And then, oh gosh, when something like happens and it's kind of almost like a circuit breaker in, this hamster wheel that you've created. Well, that happened for us. And what had happened was we found out one of our store managers of our busiest store was stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from us, like stole a lot of money. Anyway, so that was the circuit breaker that we needed to almost like take stock and be like, is this what we want to be doing? Is this where we want to be? And at the time I was actually looking at experimenting with this other business idea. It was in fashion technology with another co-founder. And I have always wanted to live and work overseas. And at that time, with everything happening, I was just like, what better place than New York City for the intersection of fashion and technology? So I was like, F it, let's go. Let's just we'll figure it out, right? I get with that we have these businesses in Sydney, but we're going to go and we're going to figure this out. So we did. We spent like a good 6 months making sure that all the systems were in place, the team was in place, everything. Now, we didn't know at the time that, because we moved over in mid 2019, we didn't know that we wouldn't be able to go back to Sydney for pretty much 2.5 to 3 years, right? So yeah, anyway, we did all the things, and then we moved over here, and my co-founder, so Bonner, actually also moved with us, because I was like, do you just want to come with us? And she was like, okay. So we hit the ground running with this fashion technology idea. We were speaking to a ton of women who we hypothesized were our ideal customers. And what we realized was that the problem that we were solving for, it was a problem, but it just wasn't a big enough one that the women would actually change their habits for. So we actually failed that idea. We failed that business. And then at that time, we were also speaking to brands and boutiques. And we were like, time and time again, their one problem was always acquisition, which I think is it's a common problem across all businesses. But that was their one thing, was acquisition. So we were like, I think that we can just help them with this. So we actually fell into agency work. And then we transitioned into coaching e-commerce business owners. And that was when we started our first podcast, actually. It's called the Growth Boss Podcast. And we had no idea what we were doing. Honestly, it was just one of those things, people tell you, you've got to start publishing, you've got to start creating content, you've got to, so we're like, okay, well, we'll just figure it out. And we had no real strategy or intention behind it. It was just like, we were just going to talk about what we were doing ourselves in the e-com world and what we're finding. And time and time again, we just got people, we'd be like, oh, how did you find out about us? Or why did you sign up? And they'd be like, I'd listened to your podcast. And so it became a theme. And I was like, wow, there's something really powerful here in podcasting, which until I think you experience it, you just don't really realize what that is. And so we actually did, multiple six figures in that business, but I actually got to a point where I was starting to feel really unfulfilled in that particular business. And I think, there was something really powerful when I was listening to Tony Robbins speak. He was saying, one of the big patterns of focus when we're feeling unfulfilled, or one of the big reasons why we feel unfulfilled is because we focus on what's missing rather than what we have. And for me, that was a light bulb moment, because I think in that particular business, I was so overwhelmed and so burnt out because I was so focused on what I perceived was missing in myself, the gaps that I had, the fact that I had to be this big expert, and I was constantly like running to try to be everything to everyone. And that was just not sustainable. And so we kind of, but what I realized that we did have, because that was his whole thing, our pattern of focus was we focus on what's missing rather than what we have. And in that moment, I realized that what I have is that I'm actually this massive introvert who just still managed to battle through that and find levels of success throughout corporate, throughout schooling, throughout corporate, throughout entrepreneurship. And that's something remarkable. And that's what I wanted to help others find, other entrepreneurs to help them find their remarkability and share that with the world. And one of the best ways that we do that is through podcasting. And so that's what got me really deep into how do we actually use podcasting with intention and with strategy to actually grow our audience and then monetize at the back of that, which I know you're a big expert in. And so, yeah, that's kind of what led us to Capsho, which I can definitely go into if that's of interest.
Yes, I want to hear about Capsho, and I want you to tell us how it's going to help podcasters, because it really sounds amazing to me. It looks like an amazing tool. So tell us all about that.
Yeah, sure. So we launched MVP, minimum viable product of Capsho, right at the end of last year. So it's only 4 or 5 months old. And when we created that, we kind of went broad, and we were like, we can help entrepreneurs tell their stories through short form content. And I know that people were like, that I was coaching was like, I know I know that I have to tell my stories, but it's so hard in short form content, in social media captions, things like that. So that's kind of why we actually initially created Capsho. And then when we decided to actually focus on podcasters and, that being the main way that people can actually share their stories, we've actually now worked on transitioning what Capsho does specifically for podcasters. So rather than trying to help all entrepreneurs, because that's a really tough market to try to get cut through in your messaging, we just wanted to focus on experts who podcast, promote, be able to grow their audience. So how Capsho does that is it's AI generated, instantly generated show notes, episode titles, descriptions, social media captions, and promotional email for their podcast episode. It's going to
Wow.
be amazing. Yeah.
That's amazing. So it started as just post captions, is that right?
Yes.
And now
Yeah.
you've morphed it into all these tools. So how does it generate that from the audio?
Yes. So basically it's pretty, like, you upload your audio and then it needs a little bit of thinking time just with the computing power, you can imagine, in the back end. And it will surface for you, and it's totally editable as well, but it will have a recommendation around what an episode title would be for that. That's, by the way, optimized for SEO, so a keyword. For descriptions, same thing. And all designed, by the way, because our whole strategy is based on what we call content honey traps. And content honey traps is how do you actually compel people through your front end funnel. So through your social media or your email list into your podcast, and through your podcast to your show notes, and from there back onto your email list or into a conversion event. And so we've actually we've laid that strategy all throughout how this AI actually generates these particular pieces of information. So social media captions and emails, or they're laying content honey traps. And then to your episode title and description for your podcast player, content honey traps. Obviously you want your podcast to be good, your episode, but then, you want to lead them into your show notes. And that itself has content honey traps to encourage people to go to the resources that you want them to go to. So that's actually, it's all inbuilt into the logic and into the AI that is actually powering Capsho.
Wow. Because I love automation. This gives me tingles, actually, because I just love automation. Because setting up automation, sometimes the word system or framework or can get a bad rap, but it's not a bad word, because automation is not a bad word, because it can actually free you up and allow you to do more of what your zone of genius is. And so
Yes.
It sounds like once you set this up and it is doing all these things for you, I mean, that's going to save people a lot of time to get to what they love doing.
Exactly. Yes.
Wow.
And this is the thing, right? I think a lot of us start podcasting, and so many, there's a stat of, 90% of people who start podcasts don't make it past 10 or 14 episodes. And
Right.
Such a big reason why is because of all of this other stuff that they didn't realize they had to do, I have to write show notes and a description. I have to promote this thing. What? And so can you imagine just how much more freer people will be in I just have to create really good content, as in that podcast episode, and hey, Capsho can do everything else for you.
Oh, that's cool. Amazing. That is amazing. So it's capsho.com. Is that right? And when will that be ready?
That is launching, or relaunching, I should say, end of May.
Wow. It's coming up quick.
In a few time. Yes.
Yes. Are there any other tips you want to share for podcasters?
I have so many. So many. Okay. So if I distilled, so we do help experts who podcast, and generally a lot of the experts are high ticket coaches and consultants. One big thing that I made the mistake as well, which is why it's such a big, when you ask about advice, like this is such a big one for me, is because we all default, or we all get so used to talking to what I call the level one client. And I think the reason why is because there's probably a few reasons why, but one is we are so used to seeing that, like so much of that. So we're like, oh, that's what people want. That's what people want to consume. So is that part of it? But then there's also, I think, a bit of imposter syndrome, which goes back to even my experience, not feeling fulfillment or thinking about what's all the things that I'm missing, is because we're like, well, who am I to tell people, or to put myself as an expert in this space? And so we default to almost lowest common denominator in our content. When we're speaking to high ticket clients or our high ticket buyers, especially through our podcast content, we want to be speaking to our level 10 client, because when you speak to your level 1 client, you're actually repelling, you're excluding the people from level 2 up all the way to level 10, right? The people that you want to be, who are your dreamiest high ticket clients. But when you speak to your level 10 client, the great thing is that everyone below that, level 1, 2, 4, 5, 8, they all are on that trajectory, that same trajectory. So they all can see themselves at that level 10 place, which means that already they, as long as they have the right values and mindset as you and who you want to attract, they're going to be in. So I think that's one big thing that I had to rewire in my own mind, was how do I create content that is relevant for my dreamiest high ticket buyers. So I don't know if that was helpful, but I thought I'd just share that little piece that I've definitely picked up in my time podcasting.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, just reaching more people. I mean, that's everybody's goal, right? So you and I connected because you're having a summit coming up soon, and you invited me on to the summit. So tell me all about the summit. Well, I know about it, but tell our audience all about the summit.
Yeah. So for anyone who wants to start a podcast, but haven't yet, there is going to be some lessons, some training from experts on how to get your podcast started correctly, all the way to how to use that and repurpose that content so that it's kind of, you really amplifying your message to then actually growing, like getting traffic. So everything from collaborations and like in terms of what we're doing, to running a viral contest, to running ads, really cool stuff. And then monetizing it, which is where you come in, Jen. You're going to be talking to us about monetizing a podcast through memberships, which is so cool. And I have other guest speakers talking about webinars and challenges and sales, how to actually convert into sale from podcast to sales. It's going to be so cool. It's such a cool summit.
Oh, it sounds so amazing. So what other speakers do you have? What other names can you tell us?
Yeah, so we have Dana Derricks, who's going to talk about Dream 100. So he's the CEO and founder of Dream 100 Software. I have Wilco from Up Viral. So he's going to be talking about running viral contests. I have Josh Elledge from Up My Influence, Melissa Ricker from Engineer to Scale. I've got Gianna Cambria, who's going to talk to us about YouTube. Like it's across the board. It's going to be so exciting.
Wow, that's quite a lineup. I feel so honored to be invited to be on your panel. Thank you. Or in your summit. So I'll be talking about how to create a reoccurring income from your podcast. And that's going to be fun to chat about that.
Yeah, for sure. I cannot wait.
So how can people sign up, and when is this happening?
It's a 3-day summit. We're open for pre-registrations right now. So we haven't yet gone fully live with registrations, but you can pre-register at growmypodcastsummit.com. So it's growmypodcastsummit.com. Go in there, register, and then you'll be one of the first to know when we actually are open for registrations. So get in.
And I'll put the links in the show notes, so you can find those at womeninpodcasting.show.
Yes.
So that's so exciting. I'm really excited for it. All right. Thank you so much for being with us today. And we'll chat again soon. And you know what? There'll be more coming from Deirdre as Capsho takes off, and check out Capsho, check out the summit. And all those links will be in the show notes at womeninpodcasting.show. Thanks so much, Deirdre. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to today's interview. You can find all the links we mentioned today in the show notes at womeninpodcasting.show. We'd love your follows, subscribes, and positive reviews. They help us to elevate women's voices everywhere. I invite you to join our community in the Women in Podcasting Facebook group and VIP club at womeninpodcasting.club.